Well, some key words that have become now part of the vocabulary when it comes to climate change, its impacts, and so on. You have something like sustainability, which has been going on for at least 4 or 5 decades, started in the 70s, being a focus after the Brundtland Conference, and then the UN took it over, and so on. And more recently, you've been hearing a lot about an ESG, environmental, societal, and governance, which applies to how corporations must do their business. This has a history in terms of economists arguing that corporations worrying about their impact on the environment, society, and their governance in terms of worrying about employee well-being and so on does not compromise profits. And there is another school that says all ESG will come with a cost, so corporations should not be worrying about it or need not worry about it, and so on. So I just wanted to include a podcast here just touching on the few basics of ESG that we need to understand. This is from Wikipedia, which lists the dimensions of ESG here. Environmental aspect: data is reported on climate change, greenhouse gas emissions, biodiversity loss, deforestation, pollution, energy efficiency, and water management. You might have read that recently the EU has made rules that corporations have to, financial investments for example, have to report their risks, climate risks associated with their investments, and so on. And there is also a new avenue of investments called impact investments, where investors worry about green projects, environmentally friendly projects, climate solutions, and so on in terms of their investments. Obviously, you cannot always worry about it. If you have a retirement account in a big mutual fund, you don't always know where all that money is going, and you may not necessarily have an option as an individual to necessarily control that. But coming back to ESG, social aspect: data is reported on employee safety and health, working conditions, diversity, equity and inclusion, and conflicts and humanitarian crisis, and is relevant in risk and return assessments directly through results in enhancing or destroying customer satisfaction and employee engagement. So as you know now, there are many examples of shareholders asking their companies where they invest to report on the environmental impact, things like ESG, as well as how careful they are being on reducing emissions, energy use, water use, and so on. So the governance aspect of the ESG then looks at data that is on corporate governance, such as preventing bribery, corruption, diversity of board of directors, executive compensation, cybersecurity and privacy practices, and management structure. So obviously I'm just being very brief here, but each one has great details. You can go and follow up on Wikipedia and the references that are in there. Taking this from Daedalus.com, nice schematic showing environmental, social, and governance. I said societal but social. Considers how a company, so in environmental, considers how a company performs as a steward of nature. So this is the data that we were talking about here. For example, climate change, energy emission, waste management, and resource depletion. What kind of impacts the company is having. Under social, examines how a company manages its relationships with employees, suppliers, customers, and the community. For example, health and well-being, building safety, employee relations, diversity, and impact on communities. Under governance, deals with how a company is governed, so executive pay, shareholder rights, board diversity, and structure audits, which is some of the things we mentioned here. So it's just putting it in a slightly different list of things. This is from a McKinsey report, which lists 5 strong environmental, social, and governance propositions that actually create value in 5 essential ways. So they start by paying attention to environmental, social, and governance, and how it concerns how these concerns do not compromise returns, and maybe they even enhance the returns. And there is a NYU Stern report I will mention after this, which also has looked at it's a meta study of many reports on ESG and the impacts on returns, and basically concludes that ESGs do enhance returns rather than compromise them. So this is also a result of greater than 2,000 studies on the impact of ESG propositions on equity returns. Share of positive findings 63%, share of negative findings 8%. So this is from this paper that's in the Journal of Sustainable Finance and Investment. So the point is, ESG, you hear a lot about it, is becoming part of the demand from the public of the companies, and what they are required to do also by governments, via legislation and so on. So the list of things under a strong environmental, social, and governance proposition, which links to value creation in 5 essential ways. So they look at these 5 propositions, and the impact being strong, and the impact of the proposition being strong or weak, with some examples. Top line growth attracts business to business and business to customers, with more B2C, B2B are common phrases used in the corporate lingo. So attract B2B and B2C customers with more sustainable products, achieve better access to resources through stronger community and government relations. If you have a weak ESG proposition in the top line growth, then you may lose customers through poor sustainability practices like human rights, supply chain, or a perception of unsustainable, unsafe products, lose access to resources including from operational shutdowns as a result of poor community and labor relations. Cost reductions, lower energy consumption, reduce water intake would be a strong ESG proposition. Under weak ESG, generate unnecessary waste and pay correspondingly higher waste disposal costs, expend more in packaging costs, for example. Regulatory and legal interventions, strong ESG proposition would be to achieve greater strategic freedom through deregulation, earn subsidies and government support through your ESG actions, whereas under weak ESG, suffer restrictions on advertising and point of sale, incur fines, penalties, and enforcement actions because you failed to meet the regulatory and legal requirements or mandates. Productivity uplift, boost employee motivation, attract talent through greater social credibility. People now choose, younger people, millennials, and so on, choose to work for companies which have strong ESG record. Deal with, in the weak ESG, this will lead to dealing with social stigma, which restricts the talent pool, so you will attract fewer people, lose talent as a result of weak purpose as well. Finally, investment and asset optimization. Strong ESG, enhance investment returns by better allocating capital for the long term. Example, more sustainable plant and equipment. Avoid investments that may not pay off because of longer term environmental issues. Under weak ESG, the same investment and asset optimization would lead to suffering stranded assets as a result of premature write-downs, fall behind competitors that have invested to be less energy hungry. So now if everybody is into ESG and your competitor is going with strong ESGs, then you may pay a price there, and expedient decisions may not end up being optimal in terms of investment and assets. Okay, so coming to the third exhibit from the McKinsey report, in many industries, a large share of corporate profits are at stake from external engagement. So these are estimated share of earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization, which is basically depreciation or writing off various assets. Banks, so capital requirements, systemic regulation like too big to fail we had in 2008, and consumer protection. I won't read all of these. You can go ahead and look at the McKinsey report. Automotive, aerospace, and defense tech, 50 to 60% estimated share of EBITDA at stake in terms of external engagement. Transport, logistics, infrastructure, telecom and media, energy and materials, resources, consumer goods, pharma and healthcare. Under consumer goods, for example, you have to worry about obesity, sustainability, food safety, health and wellness, and labeling. These are the share of corporate profits at stake from external engagement. Pharma and healthcare, market access, regulation of generic drugs, pricing, innovation, funding, and clinical trials. I didn't go into the details on how these are estimated, but you can go and read the McKinsey report. But just get an idea that the financial returns on investments and cost of not taking care of ESG is being looked at very seriously. The NYU Stern report did this meta-analysis of many publications just like the McKinsey report, and we'll read the conclusions. We drew 6 conclusions about the relationship between ESG and financial performance after examining the 1,000+ individual studies. So that's a large number of studies. Improved financial performance due to ESG becomes more marked over longer time horizons. So if the industry stays on ESG on a longer time horizon, it recovers and begins to earn financial returns on ESG. ESG integration, broadly speaking, as an investment strategy seems to perform better than negative screening approaches. A recently released Rockefeller Asset Management study finds that ESG integration will increasingly be demarcated between leaders and improvers, with the latter showing uncorrelated alpha enhancing potential over the long term. Okay, so there are financial consequences that have been reported in these 1,000+ studies in terms of ESG ROIs, return on investments. ESG investing appears to provide downside protection, especially during a social or economic crisis like the 2008 pandemic and so on. Sustainability initiatives at corporations appear to drive better financial performance due to mediating factors such as improved risk management and more innovation. Studies indicate that management for a low carbon future improves financial performance. So we are now talking about net zero and global warming targets, which we have looked at already several times. ESG disclosure on its own does not drive financial performance. So it's not a negative burden on the financial performance. So conceptual overview of how investing in sustainability and ESG drives financial performance. The study reviewed and categorized relevant academic studies and analyzed them through correlations, mediating factors, and a specific theme, climate change. So this is a big factor now in ESG, which had been the case for sustainability as well, but now it goes more into details about corporations tracking their own data in environmental, social, and governance. So there is correlations, of course, between sustainability strategy and practice with climate change action, which relates to corporate financial performance or market performance. And there is also impact of sustainability strategy and practice through mediation into corporate financial performance. So investor-focused studies tend to look at a direct relationship between ESG and performance based on benchmarks and a portfolio-level view of themes such as materiality or governance structure. Meta-analytical studies effects are hedges G or D. This is the modeling they did. A logit model is done, which you can read about in the report, which is basically about 20 pages, so it's not very long. Corporate focus studies, many include mediating factors such as innovation, operational efficiency, or risk management for a better understanding of how sustainability initiatives lead to corporate financial performance. Meta-analytical effects are partial correlations from the regression models. Okay, so This is just a very, very brief introduction. There are books on how to set up metrics for ESG, how there is companies that offer advice on investing. There are companies which advise corporations on how to take care of their ESG and so on and so forth. So you can follow up if you're interested. I just wanted to give a very brief introduction here. Okay.